for it, yeah.
Okay, cool. So hi everyone, thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Lauren and I work in the marketing department at Love Admin. For those of you that are not already familiar with us, for 12 years now, we've been helping organizations just like yourselves improve their admin, streamline their processes and increase their revenue. So whether that's powerful admin platforms you're looking for, or if you're just looking to have advice through these webinars, we're there to help you and get to your organization's success. We're joined by Richard Sutcliffe from Funding for Sport today, who's going to do a webinar masterclass with us. So yeah, over to you, Richard.
Okay. Right. Morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Richard Sutcliffe. I'm the Director of Funding for Sport, working with sort of Love Admin. We do a lot of specifically work around just working with sports clubs, organisations, groups around accessing sports funding. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cover several areas. So first of all, I'm going to focus on who can apply for funding, because obviously that's very important. You don't want to waste your time applying for things if you're not eligible. We're then going to look at various funding streams that sports clubs and organisations can apply to. And I'm just going to focus on the main ones today, because there's certain grants that you have a significantly higher chance of getting than others. So we'll focus on those. We'll follow that up with some funding hints and tips. So if you're looking to put an application in, you can have an awareness of things you want to avoid doing, as well as the top tips to making a successful application. Also, where you can find out more information about what funding is out there. And then finally, I'll just tell you a little bit about ourselves and how we kind of might be able to support you going forwards. So first of all, we're just going to focus on who can apply for funding. So in most cases, with the majority of the funders, and I'm talking sort of 90, 96, 97% of funders, you will need to be a voluntary or community organisation that's constituted as a group or a club. And that tends to be how most sports clubs are set up. Some are set up as companies, and set up as not-for-profit companies, but sort of most organisations, if you're constituted as a club with a committee, with a chairperson and secretary, treasurer, etc., then you're eligible for funding. Whether you're a registered charity, a CIO, a not-for-profit company, a lot of organisations have set themselves up as community interest companies, and that's fine. And sort of linking to not-for-profit company and community interested company, that will be a company that is limited by guarantee without a capital share. So when I talk about a not-for-profit company or a community interest company, the underlying thing under that will be a private limited company by guarantee, and guarantee is the key thing, without a capital share. Some funders will fund those organisations with shares, but again, probably 95% of them won't. Schools can apply for funding, but there's a big caveat to that. It's the main beneficiaries of that funding have got to be the wider community rather than the school itself. Statutory bodies such as local authorities, town councils, parish councils, and then finally community benefit societies. In terms of who can't apply for funding, but I will follow that up after the sort of slide, is individuals, sole traders, organisations that are based outside the UK, companies that pay profits to direct to shareholders of members, commercial or for-profit organisations, so a private limited company, or organisations with less than 3 people on its governance or committee. However, we do a lot of work with those types of organisations, and they get around this in 2 ways. So some will decide that they will either change, which is very difficult to do, or set up a separate organisation that is for not-for-profit. However, obviously there's a lot of positives to that. There's also a lot of negatives. But what a lot of those groups do is they actually partner up with the organisations that they're delivering with, and that can be sort of very beneficial. So we work with a lot of, say, dance groups, coaching companies, individuals that might, for example, deliver yoga, Pilates, physical activity dance, who work with partners that are set up for not-for-profit. So they might work with a local community centre, a neighbourhood and residents organisation. And therefore, you could put in several applications through those organisations. Are come under that category. So it's important to mention that. And if people outside of this want to sort of discuss that further, then I'll be providing the details at the end, and I'm more than happy to sort of talk that through on a case by case basis. So if we move on to sort of funding streams, I'm going to start with focusing on the two main funding sources. So the first one is the National Lottery. Now, what's good about this is that it funds up to 10,000, which is a good grant for most organisations. It's a bit busier at the moment, with it being after Christmas, but as a general rule, it can take about 4 to 6 weeks to turn around your application. There's no deadline, so you're under no pressure to submit. You can do it when you've got all your ducks in order and you're ready to move forward with your project. What the funding's about is ensuring that you hit one of those priorities. So bringing people together and building strong relationships in and across communities. So as clubs, you're doing that all the time. You know, you're bringing people together, you know, whether that's as part of a team or whether that's parents, volunteers. That's what sports clubs do. So you tick that one straight away. Improving places and spaces that matter to communities. That could be because you want, for example, to refurbish a clubhouse or your facilities. By doing that, obviously, you're improving the places and spaces. It might be that you want to run a project that by actually having something within that community might stop other problems that exist. So antisocial behaviour, by identifying that yes, there are problems in current places and spaces, but by running activities there, it will either deter people from vandalising or hanging around in those facilities, or generally across the community as a whole, people feel safer. And so again, that would tick that one, something which again, sports groups and organisations are doing day in, day out. And finally, enabling more people to fulfil their potential by working to address issues at the earliest possible stage. So that could tap into what I talked about before. I did an application yesterday for an organisation where residents have set up their own club because it's up in Scotland where they're sick and tired of drug use and the stigma around where they live, around poverty. And so they've come together as a collective to try and reduce that by setting up a number of football teams within that area. So again, that could be that. It could also be working with certain groups. So, for example, we've done projects working with people that have been diagnosed with cancer, people that have got the early signs of dementia. And so by working with them at the earliest possible stage, by running physical activity, it helps their conditions. And so again, that would tick that box if you were an organisation that did something similar to that. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but this just gives you a good breadth of the types of things they will fund. So, you know, if you do have to hire facilities to run your activities, if you do need to pay for coaches, and some organisations do, if you need to put people through training, they will fund that. If you need to market what you're doing, they'll fund that. So a nice breadth of things that they will fund. And then here's some of the things that they won't fund. So if you're a club that says, well, we need lots of equipment, you know, we need balls, bats, rackets, whatever that might be, then that would sit quite well under here. However, if you turn around and said, well, actually, we need a new cricket net, that's going to cost 15,000 and want 10,000 towards it, then that's something that they wouldn't fund. Now, the key thing about this fund is they won't fund sport for sport's sake. So that's very much why on the previous slide, I went on about their priorities and what we do. As sports groups, we hit their priorities. However, if we actually said we want to get more people into playing cricket and become better cricketers and develop their pathway so they can play an elite level, they're not interested. They're interested in those softer things that sport does to get people active and to address some of either issues within communities or just to make the community a better place. So if you wanted to make a strong application to the lottery, focus on the benefits of the community rather than the club and sport. Clearly highlight the wider issues that the community are facing. If you one of those that hits those lottery priorities, and you can clearly explain how you do that, and you don't have to hit all three, you just literally have to hit one, those are the types of applications that are going to have the greatest chance of success. One of the things that the lottery are really keen on is that it shows that the project is people-led. So sometimes if the lottery feel that you're doing it to the community, you've decided that this is what you want to do, and you don't know whether there's interest from the local community or people within the club, then they're less likely to fund it. So things like talking to people, having meetings, doing consultation surveys, those are the projects, again, that will have the greatest success. And to find out more, so obviously you can always speak to me, but if you want to find more about the fund itself, you can email them, visit their website, or they have an advice line. You can give them a call, discuss the project, and then based on that, make a decision, maybe which is a better project to go for if you have several, and just check, maybe that you are constituted correctly to apply. The one thing I would say is that sometimes the lottery will say to you, if you contact the advice line, we don't fund sports projects. We write 2 or 3 sports projects a week, and we've got a 95% success rate. So the that before Christmas, Sport England had a fund called the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Activity Fund. This has just replaced that in January. What they have done is increased the value within the fund. So it was previously up to 10,000. They've now increased that to 15,000. And you can submit an application in any 12-month period. And that's the same with the lottery. Once you apply to these grants, if you apply for, say, 3,000 and then 3 months later go, and we've got another project, we'd like to apply for another 4, you can't. You can only have one active project within 12 months. So again, something sort of worth noting. Sport England are very focused on getting the inactive and less active more active. Their priority at this moment in time, this might slightly waver a bit as time goes on, but because they've launched it again in January, it's very much focused on what they call deciles of deprivation of 1 to 3. Basically, that's the 30% most deprived areas across the country. So, and on their website, they have if you go and look at the small grants, they have like a postcode checker. So you put your postcode in of where you're going to deliver your project or where your organisation is based, and that will tell you whether you're in a 1 to 3. It'll come up with an Excel spreadsheet, and it'll tell you whether you're in a 1 to 10 area. Obviously, if you're in 1 to 3, that's great. You can go for their funding. If you're outside of that, then the chances of success are much less. In terms of what the application is looking for, they're very keen on the need for your project, and also, again, how people have been involved in developing that project. Again, applications should consider how you add value to services currently available in your community. So basically, you're not duplicating what exists, but also that you are working collaborative with other groups to maximise impact of your project. That could be joint promotion. That could just be working in partnership with another organisation to make it more successful. At the moment, there's a closing date of applications of the 30th of June. Again, there's no deadline. It's rolling. I've spoken to Sport England about this, and basically, when it hits the 30th of June, they'll just be opening another small grants with the likelihood linking it into King's coronation that'll be happening later this year, and they'll just sort of replicate that with the name of the fund. The probably priorities and the form itself will probably not change. And again, there's a link there where you can apply for that. One thing to note, because I know there's a lot of football clubs on here today, that Sport England won't fund football for football's sake. They will send you to the Football Foundation. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. That's a bit frustrating because although Football Foundation have a lot of capital grants, they have very few revenue. And so Sport England won't fund football clubs for, say, up to £10,000 revenue projects. They'll tell you to go to the Football Foundation, and Football Foundation don't have such schemes in place at the minute. So it's a bit frustrating. But we get around that by, again, focusing on all the benefits that a project might have and advise people to go to the lottery rather than Sport England. And again, they're the details that if you want to find out more, again, they've got an advice line that you can contact if you've got any queries in relation to that. So what must you have in place, first of all, to be able to apply for a grant? You must have at least 3 unrelated people on your governing body. We have a lot of situations where maybe things have been set up by husbands and wives and they're down as the sort of main 2, and then they've roped somebody else from the family to be on it. They've got to be unrelated. And again, sometimes you get situations where people aren't related, but they do live at the same household, and again, they won't accept that. So you just need 3 unrelated people on your governing body. You can get away with 2 people that are related, but the third person has got to be not related, and one of the related people and the unrelated people need to be the 2 people on the application form. You need a UK bank account with 2 unrelated signatures on there. That's for fraud, so to avoid that. You do have to be a little bit careful with a lot of banks, especially due to COVID, set up a lot of online banking. Some of these aren't based in the UK, so you just need to be a bit careful with that. So Starling is now accepted, but wasn't before. But there's things like Tide that are still ones that I believe these types of funders won't accept. You need a written governance document. So if you are a company limited by guarantee, that might be a memorandum of understanding, articles of association. For a club, a not-for-profit club, that be your constitution. Men, there's an acceptance at certain sports. If you set up a team that is specifically open to one gender, that's fine. They accept that. What they mean is that it's not a private club where only certain people can join and other people get turned away. In terms of grants, with the ones that I focused on there, your grant must be completed in 1 year of getting the grant confirmed, and that's 1 year from the money hitting your bank account. So I'm not going to go into sort of detail with these ones, but just grants that are around that you can look at. All vary in one. What you tend to find is that when you come across things like supermarket grants, you find that they are very much sort of done differently. So they might be done on almost like a token basis. So you apply, and then if they like your project, they might, at their local store, they might pick 3 projects, and then Tesco do it through their Bags for Help, and it's like tokens. Co-op do it through their membership card scheme. So when you swipe your food through, you're donated 1 of 3. Money goes into their account, and it's done via sort of, I think it's 2p in every pound goes towards your cause. Some of those can be a bit time consuming, whereas the other ones you would get the money straight away up front in your account. And again, here's some more there that you can look at. It's also worth looking at local council grants. Sometimes the local council have specific grants. Sometimes they will have grants of various levels with specific themes around them, but it's certainly worth looking at what your local councils might be offering grant-wise. To look further for funding, obviously you can just do a straightforward Google sports funding search. What I've found really sort of useful is something called Grantway. What you they've got sort of thousands of grants on there, and how you just do it once you've registered with them, and they're not pesty or anything like that. You just have to register. You can search your grant, and you can do it on very different levels. So you can do it on an area-based approach. You can do it on capital and revenue. You can do it on the type of grant you're after. So say for example, it's got one under sport, leisure and physical activity, so you can click on that. And also the type of amount you're looking for, and that will obviously just sort of lower your search. It'll then give you several grants that are available that you could look at. Again, sometimes it's not all about grants. There are other avenues that you can raise funds. I know obviously there's specific models that clubs and organisations will adopt within their organisations, maybe race nights, events that they'll put on. And obviously there's that, but in terms of sort of fundraising platforms, I'm sure you'll be aware of a lot of these. There's things like Give to Local, Easy Fundraising, Just Giving, and there's also something that not a lot of people know about, but called Snap Sponsorship. And what they do, or my understanding of what they do, is that they almost, when you register, they'll take a cut, but they will partner up your organisation with maybe, for example, a business that's signed up with them that's in your local area, or that particularly wants to fund a particular project or a particular sport. I think that's quite successful. So that again, that might be something that clubs want to look at. Something that's becoming more and more popular is crowdfunding. A lot of organisations don't like crowdfunding because they think it's too much effort. So what tends to happen more, or has tended to happen more recently, is that organisations have matched people's crowdfunding pages, which has made it more sort of appealing for clubs to apply to. And Sport England have done something similar. And this is open to football clubs as well. So this is something that football clubs can look at. Sport England will match up to 50% to a maximum match of 10,000. So if you have got a crowdfunding page of 22,000, the most you'll get from them is 10,000. If you had a crowdfunding page of 12,000, they would match it up to 6,000. The really sort of, it's a really good scheme. It's something that you tend to get funding from. The crowdfunding themselves offer expert and guidance to you in terms of making a really successful crowdfunding page. Every page that's done, whether it's active or has been active, you can find on the crowdfunding page. So almost you can copy and paste or look at their ideas to make sure that you've got a really strong crowdfunding page. They also offer one-to-one support and guidance, as well as running monthly 30-minute webinars if that's a route that you want to go. In terms of how it works, if your application is approved, then you can say you get up to 50,000 with a maximum of 10,000. How it works with Sport England is that when you raise 25% of your initial target, they will show their hand about how much they will match your project. What they will also do is they will set a caveat of minimum number of supporters, because they're well aware that if a club has a big sponsor and the big sponsor just went, right, great, there's 10,000, that potentially you could use funding. So they will send a minimum number of supporters that can support your project with your seasons, is that you can put things like sponsorship in there. So if you were a cricket club and you had boards around your ground and people sponsored those, you can also use subscriptions. So if you have a time of year where you're pulling your membership subscriptions, again, you can use that. All Sport England really like is that you will do a video that's up to 2 minutes to explain your project and what it does, with lots of photographs, and that they call them rewards. So if you use your memberships, they call it junior membership reward, senior membership reward. The rewards, that you also have more unique ones in there, and examples of that are maybe local businesses, maybe a butcher's or a florist that might donate some flowers or some meat for, say, £50. You put it on your crowdfunding page for £40. Somebody feels that they've got a bargain, so they'll buy it. You benefit as a club because you get the £40. The butchers or the florists feel good because they've given something back to the community, and so it's almost like everybody wins. We've had people that have done it near sort of Christmas time, where they've done things like selling tickets for pantos or certain events. So there's different ways you can do it, sign shirts, etc., etc. And then the key thing to note, you must hit your target of 100%. So you're £10 short, you won't get anything from Sport England. So you do need to pitch it right, and it is difficult. But the positive, if you exceed your target, then Sport England won't ask for the money back. So, you know, if you had a target of 10,000 and Sport England said we give you 5 and you managed to raise 16, Sport England won't ask for the money back. They'll accept that you can then use that in your club to improve it and do it that way. And one sort of helpful tip, don't do what my club did, which is they got a sponsor. We had a target of 9,000. I said to my club, don't exceed, just get to 25% and then wait. We got a £6,000 sponsorship put in straight away, and Sport England said, well, after a week we'd got 6,500 towards a 9,000 target, and Sport England just went, I think you're going to hit your target the way you're going. So on this occasion, we're not going to sort of buy into your project. So make sure that people don't get too eager too soon. Try and really sort of take control of your page and the people that are putting into it to ensure that you get the most money you can from Sport England. And there's a link there to how you find out more. So I know a lot of organisations will work with schools or work in schools. And so I just wanted to just cover this because we frequently get asked about schools and funding for schools, etc. So although there's not a lot of grants out there, there is, if you can make your project community centered. So if a school applied, for example, on your behalf because you are a club that uses their facilities out of school hours, then that might be something that you can look at. But also because ANSA Landscapes do a lot of work with schools and are keen that they get funding to buy them in, they've got a really good sort of free resource that you can look at, and it's got over 100 sort of funding streams. You kind of have to be a bit careful as you look through it, because you know, to make sure it's applicable. But they have a really good grants guide specifically of grants that schools can apply for, which might support you if you're working with a school to deliver activities. It has to be outside of school hours. Funders will not fund anything within school hours. They see that the responsibility of the school. And there's also a free writing successful applications guide as well that they provide. So again, if you are linked up with schools, that might be something to look at. Big amounts of money, I might have to loan money. There's an organisation called Sport and and they will sort of work with you to pay that back after time to ensure that you can deliver your project, and there's more information on that there. So I'm just going to move on to capital funding. So that could be things like you wanting to do an extension to a building so more people can use it, improving your changing facilities, toilet facilities. It could be things like tennis clubs wanting new floodlights or refurbishing of tennis courts. It could be cricket clubs wanting fixed cricket lanes. So I'm going to touch on Sport England capital funding, even though at this moment it's currently closed, because there is signs that this might open up in April 2023. There's no confirmation of that, but having spoken to Sport England, there is a bit of an indication that this might open up in the new financial year. based on sort of previous Sport England capital funding, it's really about improving and protecting existing sports facilities that support the need of the local community, but also investing in new and different places. That in particular, I find with capital funding, it doesn't always have to be the case, but Sport England are always keen to support underrepresented groups, such as women and girls, older people, disabled people, people from black and ethnic minorities, lower socioeconomic backgrounds. But again, you know, they're not necessarily always set on that, but they will want to see you being able to bring new audiences into your club if you want capital projects doing. Another one to look at is Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy. Now, that is merely based around where your club is, if they are new developments, usually housing developments, and there's been a loss of green space. Sometimes there's quite a bit of money that can be released from that. It's a tough one because there'll be more money the more affluent an area is, and the size of the development. But sometimes when that money gets released, it can vary. So sometimes it's the beginning of the build, sometimes it's the end, and sometimes it can be at different sort of stages throughout the build. So obviously these things can take time, but I've known clubs get sort of 20 to 30,000 from it, all the way up to 800,000. So there can be a lot of money released from these schemes. Sometimes you will find that there'll be a grant scheme set up linked to that. They'll form it into some sort of grant scheme, and it'll be launched by the local authority. In a lot of cases, the local authorities don't want you to know about that money because they'd like to spend it on what they'd like to spend it on. So the best way to find out about it is by contacting your local council's planning department. And you might get passed from pillar to post to start with, but you will get to the right person eventually, and then ask the question, and you'll probably get one of three answers. Yes, there is, which is great. You can find out more. No, there isn't, and obviously there's nothing you can do about that. Or they might say yes, but it's allocated, or it's not decided on how that money is going to be spent. If that happens, try and contact your local MP or mainly your local councillor and get them to lobby on your behalf, because the councils answer to local councillors and they can fob us off more easily than they can a local councillor who can dig deeper and also fight your case that some of that money goes in your direction. So that's just a bit of advice really on that one. Landfill funding. So that's where they are waste recycle sites. Some are active, some aren't. So you have to do a search, but popular kind of ones that are around at the moment used to be called REN. That's now called FCC Community Fund. That's something you can look at. Viridor Credits, Veolia, Biffa, Seuss. But again, I think my advice, you can do it by going on their sort of sites, but each one has a postcode checker. I have a list of all of them, so if people want me to check if they've got a capital project, whether you're in an eligible area, in most cases you need to be in a 10-mile radius of a site. So your club needs to be in a 10-mile radius of that. Some it's lower, some are 7 and 5 miles, but most are 10. Most of these offer grants, which range from 5,000 to 100k. Tends to be that the average grant they give out is between 45 and 55,000. Deadline dates throughout the year. Some close and open up. Some are open the next cycle. They tend to be quarterly. So just some sort of help there with that. And then these aren't capital grants. These are just general grants that might potentially offer revenue and capital funding. Again, I won't go into each of these because the sport's by sport, and obviously I don't know which sports are on there. One thing I will do, just because I know that there's a lot of football clubs on there, Football Foundation have a lot of various grants, and they seem to work on a basis of that if the club can find from their smaller schemes, which is up to 25,000, 25%, they will provide 75%, and that covers a whole raft of things from storage containers, goalposts, improvements to buildings, pitches. So, and my club, I'm club secretary of my junior football club. We've done very well out of that. They also then have a bigger scheme where they like things to be matched on a 50-50 basis. But the way it works is that if you'll have to sort of almost get the green light, have to work alongside your county FA, get the green light from them that it's a project they want to fund, and then work with them to apply to the Football Foundation. And that's when these other sort of capital grant funds potentially come in to support you to be able to find the match. Because if you're looking at something like a 4G pitch, you're sort of looking at a good $500,000. But they will fund quite a lot. So we've had clubs that have got a good 500,000 from them. So there's good chunky money there to sort of look at. A few more grants there for different other sports that again might be popular. And these slides are going to be shared, so don't worry scribbling everything down if you need to get website links, etc. So I know there's questions coming in, and I'll tackle those questions at the end. But if we move on to funding hints and tips, first of all, key things to avoid when doing an application. Funding applications with lots of buzzwords. People have a tendency to think that if they can put things that kind of they think are current buzzwords, that helps the application. It doesn't. You're best just keeping it nice and simple with just trying to explain what you're trying to do. Making grandiose claims that, you know, by doing this, you're going to change the whole world in sport. You know, you're not. You're going to make a good difference to your local community, your local club. So just keep it at what it's going to do. You know, if it enables you to be able to bring more community events into your club, more groups, even if they're non-sport specific, if it's going to help get more people active, more people playing the sport, that's what they're looking at, not making sort of things that really not achievable. This is quite a good one, really. Sometimes we get carried away that because we know our club and the club situation and why we need the funding, that we kind of spend too much time talking about, I suppose, how great our club is or organisation rather than actually the project. So they're more interested in knowing what your project is and why you need it doing, and just doing that nice and clearly and explaining what the rationale is for that. Don't ask for more money than you really need. You know, a lot of funders, especially the small grants, actually, if it's a good project, they will fund it. They'll for what you've asked for, so they will give you the amount that you asked for. So ask for what you need. Sometimes you find clubs struggling to find the money for that, and sometimes they might spend it on other things, and then they get caught out, and then the funder will want to claw back that money. So just ask for what you need. What funders do particularly like, and this is becoming more and more sort of prominent, is they do like bids where there's money coming from elsewhere. So whether that's the club budget, crowdfunding, or the fundraising we've discussed, and that's particularly the case the more funding you ask for. So bear that in mind, because that's going to give you a greater chance of success. Don't rush your application. Take your time, refine it. A lot of the applications don't have deadlines, so there is no rush. So take your time and make sure that you know you're in a situation where you know you get it right. Be specific on geographical areas and age groups. Again, if you are asking for a small grant, I'm based in Sheffield. If I said I wanted funding to support the whole of Sheffield, it's massive. My funding just couldn't literally support like the whole of Sheffield. You know, and the same goes for age groups. You know, try and make them more to size. If you're wanting to run a sports camp, for example, or a sports specific camp evening session, just say you're targeting 12 to 14-year-olds from the local neighbourhood of X. You know, the smaller geographical area to a certain degree can be better. So again, don't go too broad. Again, I kind of covered that in the point below. Again, I think sometimes it's useful to share your application with somebody else. So somebody who doesn't know your project or your organisation can really understand what you're wanting to achieve, what you're asking for. So almost put them as if they were the funder. And then again, sometimes you might not always be the best applicant. So if you are working with a partner, you know, have a look who is the best of the two to organise. And that might vary per fund. But just look at that and think, actually, you're better to apply than us because you've got a greater chance of success. So again, that's something to consider. And then just a few tips that'll sort of help you with your application, and hopefully won't duplicate things we just talked about there. So be clear on your funding requirements before making application, and ensure that it fits one of their aims and objectives. So if we think about the lottery fund early slides where we sort of discuss their priorities, you've got to hit one of them. So ensure that you, first of all, before you make an application, that you are going to hit one of their priorities, aims or objectives, and then make sure when you're doing the application that you kind of refer to that so they can clearly see how they align. Be aware of funding deadlines. A lot don't have deadlines, but some do. If you miss the deadline, you've missed it. There's no sort of, with funders, they're very strict on that. If you're a day late, hour late, minute late, you've missed your chance. So just make sure that you know you time things right. They won't fund things retrospectively, so don't start any work on your project until you've been granted the funding. You know, if you've done something and thought, oh, I didn't realise there was funding for that, you know, it's too late, unfortunately. So you have to time things right. What you tend to find, although funds vary, is that your project really needs to start at least from the application date, at least 3 months after. So you need to time that quite well. Because otherwise, you know, if you want to put an event on and it's 2 months' time and they've got a 3-month sort of lead-in time, if you like, then obviously they can't fund it. Also consider, are there any sort of internal funds you can contribute towards it? Kind of touched on that a little bit before. Bear with me a moment, slides are going a bit. Check how big the overall pot is. Sometimes some funds just aren't worth going for. You know, if you think, right, oh, that's quite good, they've got 100,000 that they're giving out, well, that's good. But if it's across the whole country and they're giving out grants up to 5,000, well, that's only 20 projects, and across the whole country, that's the chances of your success are very slim. And you have to sort of acknowledge that even though you are in a situation where you might have a good project, you might be against charities that are working with some of the most vulnerable people in society, and they will always trump sports clubs and organisations. So just think about that when you're sort of applying. Sometimes good that once you've found a potential fund to speak to someone from that organisation or speak to me, you know, and so at least you can explain your project and I'll be able to sort of say, or they will be able to say whether I think it's something that's got a good chance of success or something that they'll consider. Make sure you read all the guidance note and funding criteria just to make sure your club hits that. Be clear and concise in your applications. In a lot of cases, you only have a few words to get your information across to them, so try and, you know, not write excessive amounts, don't waffle. A lot of these do have word counts on, so you can't exceed that. And sort of remember that first impressions last, and then ensure that all relevant sections on the form are completed and signed. A lot of forms these days are online, so it won't allow you to submit an application if things are missing. So if they ask you for things, then even if you think it's crazy, a lot of forms will ask you for dates of birth of the contacts on the form. You might think, well, why do they need to know that? They do, and if you don't put it on, you just cannot move further forward with the application. Again, because it's online, you'll get a notification in most cases that your application has been received. If you don't get that, or if it's a different way of doing it other than online, when you've submitted it, just contact someone at the organisation just to check that they've received it. We do have cases where people wait ages and ages, then contact them and find out that they never received the form in the first place, and then sometimes that can scupper a project, or it means that they've got to wait, just as long to find out if they've been successful. So Sport England keep very up to date on their funds, and also what funding's out there. So that's a very good link to use. There's something called Club Matters, which produces a series of resources, case studies, guides, toolkits to support clubs and organisations. That's very good. It's not just all around funding, but there's some good things about fundraising, grants, and other sort of ways of raising monies. Sport and Recreation Alliance, they also provide clubs and organisations with good guidance. County sports partnerships, so for people that don't know, they're like umbrella organisations that support sports clubs and organisations within their specific county. Sometimes, especially with lower pots of funding, Sport England will allocate a pot of funding. There's one at the moment called Tackling Inequalities that they give to the County Sports Partnership, and they will launch those. So it's worth linking up with them. It's also, worth seeing what sort of funding that they've got and getting on their mailing list. There's also other sort of organisations like Street Games and Sport Ed, which might be organisations, again, you might want to just link up with because they sometimes get funding as well. And then finally, just ourselves really, in terms of how we can support you. Funding for Sport is me. I've not got a massive team, it's just me. But what I do is I help clubs find funding and offer a range of services to support you. Some are free, so it's not all about, me making money from all of this. We offer free funding advice, so we do one-to-one support with groups and organisations. We do all of that over Zoom or Microsoft Teams. But if you want to get, if you've got clubs, members of your club that want to be part of it, that's a good way to do that. Or alternatively, you can contact me over the phone and we can have a chat about your project, and based on that, I can help you either in the right direction or, identify funding streams based on projects. We look over funding bids for free. So if you think, well, we've got people within our club that can do this, then that's absolutely fine. We can look over your bid and give you pointers on how to make it stronger, what to take out, what to add. One thing we can't do is rewrite it for you, because that does come under our bid writing service, which we do on a no-win, no fee. And basically, if we write bids that are under 10,000, then we work on a 10% no-win, no fee. If we write bids over 20,000, we work on a 5% no-win, no fee. And the anomaly is £1,000 in between those. So we also offer that, but it is what it says. It's a no-win, no fee. If an application is not successful, we don't charge you anything. And in most cases, we try and rewrite it, because sometimes funding applications aren't always successful first time around, and there's a number of reasons for that. And then there's our website. So I constantly update the website with new funding streams and information. You can, by the website, link up to our newsletter that goes out every Monday, and basically that captures anything new that comes in that you might be interested in. So again, if that's something of interest, it's free to subscribe to the newsletter. Then that's another way forward. If you want to speak to me or contact me, then my details. Quite good with emails, do get back to people quite quickly. And then obviously there's my telephone number as well, if people want to arrange a time to discuss their project. And that's it. I mean, hopefully that's been useful. I guess it's now in opportunities to ask any questions. I know that some questions have been coming in, so I'll see if I can work through the chat. I don't know, Lauren, if you are able to pick them out for me and I can answer those.
No worries. So we've got a question from Glynis in the chat, and it says, any funding for swim schools for teacher training?
There will be, yeah. I mean, things like lottery is one. I think the Swim Foundation, they offer things. I guess the key thing is it goes back to how you set up as an organisation in terms of who applies. So if you're a swim school that is for profit, so private limited company, for example, then you won't be able to apply for funding. However, if you are working with an organisation to deliver those lessons and sessions that you put on, then that might be a way of doing it, a way around it. And obviously, I can discuss that further. But yeah, you can access it, but if you are a private limited company, you wouldn't be able to. It'd have to be through somebody. Grants that we discussed earlier would be ones that you could look at.
Perfect. We also have another question from Gemma. So Gemma says, I'm a limited company, a dance school, that hires halls in schools. Can I ask the school to apply for funding? Would that be just for the children attending their school to participate in the dance classes, or for the wider community?
Right, so the school could apply on your behalf, yes. I would have to be outside of school time, and they would expect that it would have to be for community dance classes. Obviously, the local school can feed people into those. You know, it might be that you run one specifically outside of school for that particular school. My honest view in that would be is don't tell the funder that, because that might deter it, even though it's a community session, you know, aimed at, obviously if you go to that school then you're going to live in a local community. But again, they're very skeptical of school applications, so it would be very much around sort of being able to do it. One thing which will go against exactly what I've said there, what funders struggle sometimes with is if you own a facility and a school owns that facility, is asking to hire that facility out because it's yours. And sometimes they get a bit funny about that and think, well, maybe you should be offering that for free, which is easier said than done, because you need a caretaker to open up and obviously heating and everything else. So they will fund that if it's outside of school time, but it's not something that they might come back and forwards with the school on to question, which is a bit frustrating really, because actually if you ran the same session but did it in a community centre, you know, and the community centre applied, they'd be all over that. They would have no problem funding that whatsoever, but they're just a bit skeptical of schools. So in answer to your question, the school could apply, but what they would have to do is to say, you know, we need it, rather than the venue hire what you might pay, they would have to probably come at the approach of saying, because it's out of school hours, we need it to cover heating, lighting, and almost come at it that way. Or someone to come and open up the building, they would have to approach it that way, rather than saying venue hire. If you're hiring a community hall and the community hall applied for you, they could do that as, you know, venue hire.
Amazing. We have a question here from Andrew as well, and he says, what did your club apply for from the Football Foundation, and was it an easy process? Any tips?
Yeah, very easy process. I'm very kind of moral in what I do, and I would say to people that you don't need my support to write a football foundation, a small football foundation application. We've had goalposts from them. We've had storage containers from them, although you do need planning permission first for things like storage containers, because it's a right aesthetics of how it looks, and it's got to sort of link in with the environment. So we've had that from them. Trying to think, we've had loads of those movable goalposts that've been sort of really good. They've helped us with our pitches, so we've had lots of money there's a grant that helps maintain pitches on a sliding scale, so you get sort of 6,000 from them in the first 2 years. Second 2 years you get 2 lots of 3,000, and then the last 2 years you get 2 lots of 1,500. So it's a, you know, we've had lots from them, and it's quite straightforward. If you link up, you do need to link up with your county FA. So once you're linked up with your county FA, they almost act as your kind of support mechanism to link up with the Football Foundation. We'll probably speak to county FA and say, do you know this club? Are you working with them? You know, do they do good work? Yes, it's great. Would you be happy for us to fund their project? Yes, we would. And the turnaround quite quick. Goalposts, I knew within 2 weeks I got the funding from the goalposts. So we got a tractor through it as well. Yeah, got that. So we got a tractor mower from them. to maintain our pitches, because we're a tenant on there. And if as long as the agreement with the people that own those pitches, it's fine. So we've done quite well out of it, and it's an easy process. Yeah.
Amazing. I'll pick a couple more questions from the chat. So is the Sport England small grant available for community drama projects for a charitable arts organisation?
No, not Sport England. Sport England is purely sport, and they don't class drama, even though you might be quite active and moving around as a sport. In most cases, there is slight differences to that, but in most cases, to be able to apply to Sport England. Obviously, there are caveats to that because they have things like movement and dance, in yoga, which is not necessarily classed as a sport. So there are a few caveats to that. But in answer to your question, no. However, the Arts Council and Awards for All would fund drama projects.
So we have another one. Football club needs to build a new clubhouse, which will cost a minimum of £100,000. We know we can apply to the Football Foundation for some and have made a CIL application, but with increasing costs, we have a big shortfall. We own the land. Do you have any recommendations to help?
Possibly could look at landfill funding. Obviously, I have to do a check on that. And so that would probably be the one I would look at. If your site was multi-sport, then as well as sort of football, potentially when Sport England's capital funding opens up, they will fund a contribution towards that. I mean, Sport England do give the money to the Football Foundation, as well as Football Foundation getting monies through Premier League and other things. But if it's a multi-sport site, then Sport England do look at that. Obviously, if it's not, then that's not an option. Then you can look at little scrapes of monies like the crowdfunding we talked about. That might help. And whether there's any local sort of grants that you could look at. It depends where you're based, but if you're in London, the London Marathon Charitable Trust, they fund like London boroughs with capital projects up to decent amounts. There is other areas, I know, Severn Trent. So if you're water supplied by Severn Trent, they have a community fund, which funds up to, I think, somewhere, I don't know if it's 100 or 50,000, but again, they give a decent amount. So there might be bespoke ones to the area. In terms of the main ones, then really, obviously, you've tapped into Football Foundation, you've tapped into Section 106 SIL money. So landfill and crowdfunding, and maybe some other council grants might be really the main things that are available to you, unless there's anything bespoke.
Amazing. I'll choose the last question. Any questions that we don't get to as well, I'll speak to Richard and see if we can email you guys separately of your answers. But here's a question from Jamil. Would funders avoid applications where a CIC is in partnership with an LTD and the director is the same person for both companies?
Yes and no. If it was really blunt and it was really clear that you are wanting funding to pay for the other company to come in and deliver it, then they would frown on that. If the CIC doesn't mention that, then it's down to whether the funder picks that up. In a lot of cases, it doesn't. You know, I'm not in the sort of business of telling people of ways around things to try and, you know, make other companies money if it's your own company. But a lot of companies can't draw down funding but do very good work. And so my advice would be is if you're I would set up a CIC with a different name, you know, to your other limited company, so there's not a direct, you know, it looks like an obvious direct link. And as part of that, you know, I wouldn't mention that you're going to be paying your other company to come in and deliver it. It's a grey area. Some people frown on it. Some people say, well, actually, we're doing really good work, and that's the only way we can get around it to deliver really good projects to our local communities. So I hope that answers your question. That would be my approach.
Amazing. Amazing. We've had a few more questions come through, so I'll send those over to Richard after the webinar and then see if we can get the answers over to you guys. But thank you so much, Richard, for today's webinar. It's been really informative. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure hopefully everyone else has got a lot to work on as well for the back of the webinar. We'll email out the slides and also the recording to everyone, because I know that there was a lot of really useful links and resources in there as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Richard.
Yeah, no problem. And in terms of things like awards for all, just seen something about Scotland. The governing bodies will support you if you're in Scotland. Awards for all funds Scotland, Wales, England, and Northern Ireland. So that would be the one you would go to, really, if you're based outside England.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.